Hello.
Hope everything's going well.
We will start in 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes. I'm actually really excited about this because I haven't been able to gush about fantasy with anybody in a while, and I need this, so this is gonna be fun.
Oh, I'm always good for
like
this.
air.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm at my desk right now, and it's quite messy because I was doing this whole. I got a lot of stuff to mail out, but so my desk is covered in all of my book plates, which are pretty sweet. Along with my beverage.
I need to get that. There's a link I need to go find.
I'm eagerly awaiting the email from the bookstore to be able to go pick it up. I actually literally just finished Midnight Bargain last night too.
No.
Yes. Yes. I have so many good thoughts, but yeah, I was I can't come in here and fan out. I gotta be a moderator. So
I mean, both is good. I mean, I fully plan on doing that. So
I think that's why I when Dave asked me to do this, I was like, hell yes, I'm doing this. What do you mean? He told me who was on the panel, and I'm like, yeah, I love all their work. I'm in here. Move out the way.
Eboni, I'm dropping the link to you in the chat, which is, I guess, for everybody else too. But if you guys have pre-ordered the Unbroken, you can get one of these sweet book plates until I run out of money.
Can't wait. I'm very excited.
I know.
Grab the book plate.
All right, so I think we can start now, actually, because he said 5 and it is now 6. So hello everyone, welcome to the panel. We are going to be querying fantasy today. So I have some really cool panelists who, I mean, you just heard, I love them all, and I'm gushing about them already. I will just let them go around and introduce themselves, and I'll just call you guys so nobody gets all confused about the order. So we will start with Sheree, since you were just talking about your book coming out.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sheree, and let me just pop this out. I am the author of The Unbroken, CL Clark, and I also am an editor. I edit at Podcastle and nonfiction as well at the Sifwa blog right now, and I write short stories, which you can find in various places. I'm a big epic fantasy proponent. It's my first love. I'm only actually recently getting into sci-fi, so epic fantasy is where it's at. I'm very excited to be here. Oh, and obviously gay epic fantasy. So
all right, we will go with Christopher next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christopher Caldwell. I'm a Black American who lives in Glasgow. I mostly write short fiction. I've been published places like Uncanny Magazine, Faya, and Strange Horizons. And I'm working on a longer piece of fiction that I have no estimated time of finishing because it is turned into a giant snowballing thing of doom. And I'm really excited to be here today with some great writers. And most of the stuff I write is fantasy, although I would argue that most of the stuff I write is not epic fantasy, but we'll talk about that later. Thanks.
All right, so we will go to Chelsea next.
Hi. Okay, so I'm Chelsea. The name on the covers of my books is CL Polk. I didn't bring books. The latest book to come out is the last book of the Kingston cycle, and its name is Soul Star. And so I have finished trilogy, and then over there is the cover for The Midnight Bargain, the book that came out in October that has turned my world upside down ever since it was chosen as a finalist for the CBC Canada Reads competition. I am a writer of fantasy, and I'm going to make a bold argument that the Kingston cycle is actually epic fantasy, and I'll explain why later.
All right, so yes, in total 100% agreement. But before we get into that, Ebony, last but not least, I'll let you introduce yourself.
I 1,000% agree with that as well. So I'll just say that from the outset. Hi, I'm Ebony. I am a writer of mostly fantasy. Stone and Steel is over here in this back corner. Hopefully you're seeing it the way I am vanning it. It is a novella of epic-ish fantasy, I would say. And I am the managing editor for File Literary magazine. I think that's all of the major things you need to know. I've published some short fiction as well, but I think we need to get to the heart of this, which is really that, of course, the Kings and Queens cycle is epic fantasy.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, that's actually the perfect segue to like the first question I had. Like, what is epic fantasy and what isn't epic fantasy? So Chelsea, you have an argument. I'm gonna let you start off.
Okay. The first thing that I want to say is that I have this association in my mind that epic fantasy is kind of connected to epic poetry. And what I mean is that I feel like an epic fantasy often has a feel of belonging in the same kind of like tradition as stories like, you know, the Iliad and the Kalevala and stuff like that. Massive complex stories, loads of characters, but here's the thing that I think maybe some people don't really want to argue about for epic fantasy, but I think the epics, the thing that makes an epic fantasy is that the protagonists are struggling for something bigger than just their personal fame or advancement. They're struggling for the fate of the world, and that how do I put this? I think that epic fantasies are about the change, the ending of one era and the beginning of another. And epic fantasy is set on the events that made that change happen. And that's the reason why I say the King's cycle is an epic fantasy, because the story is about a collective of characters instead of one lone hero. But the story is actually about how Kingston changed, how they transformed themselves from this capitalistic elite ruling monarchy to what it becomes. No spoilers. And that even though it doesn't fit the whole medieval Europe stereotype, it's epic fantasy all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. 110% agreement with that definition. Ebony, what are your thoughts on what is and what isn't epic?
Yeah, I think of epic fantasy primarily as being sort of secondary world, and secondary world meaning that obviously it's not set in our current, like I'm not going to walk out and hear someone talking about their iPhone, but also that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are similar to our world, right? Like you don't get an epic fantasy with swords if there aren't already swords in the world for us to know about, right? Like you don't know about swords. We're not making up swords. That is a thing. And so that's why I agree that Witchmark and all of the books in the series obviously are, even though they have all of these things that are similar, there's all of these pieces that relate to our world, but aren't necessarily the same thing. They don't necessarily share the same name, even if they share the same shape. They don't. Yeah, I just think epic fantasy is so much broader sometimes than what we traditionally think it is, and I'm excited to talk about some of the great epic fantasies we're getting to read right now too. But that's what I think is, it's like secondary world, but that doesn't mean secondary world doesn't play with all the things from our world.
I like that. Yeah, I'm a huge secondary world proponent, and yeah, we're definitely gonna be talking about what we're reading, but I'm not gonna sidetrack. All right, so Christopher, what do you think about epic fantasy? What is and what isn't epic fantasy?
Right. So I'm going to start off by saying that I think a lot of genre distinctions, and in particular subgenre distinctions, so epic fantasy is a subgenre, are kind of artificial. So it's really hard to pin down what is this one thing and what isn't this thing. For me, if you're going to force me, which you kind of are, into describing what an epic fantasy is, I would agree with it being a secondary world generally. I'm sure there are versions of epic fantasies that probably fit our own world. I just can't think of any right now. I also would agree that the stakes in an epic fantasy have to be bigger than personal stakes. They have to be kind of large stakes. It has to be something, maybe it's not, fighting to save the world, but it is something that is hugely important to the character or characters in it. So those are the two things that make epic fantasy for me. It's not at all a European setting. When we talk about what we're reading and what we like reading, both of the examples that came to my mind have nothing to do with European settings and don't really care about Europeans at all. So, but yeah, it's all about the kind of high stakes struggle and the world that isn't quite like ours, isn't quite a rational world, but is kind of internally consistent.
Okay, yeah, no, I like the internally consistent. That's a good point to end on. Last but not least, Sheree, how do you feel about this topic?
So, and if you see me like staring off to the side of space, it's because I'm taking notes on what you guys are saying. So my background is very much like these, give me those big door stoppers. If it's not 1,000 pages, I don't want it. So like Wheel of Time was one of my big ones, and probably the one that I really just sort of was like, this is epic fantasy, other than like, the obvious like Lord of the Rings or whatever. And so I think a part of me definitely has imprinted on the idea that an epic fantasy does have very large scope. And while I don't think anymore that it needs to be like the end of the world, I do feel like in a sense it needs to be at least 2 nations. Like it needs to be big enough to encompass 2 nations in my head. The more the merrier. So like if I were to think about real world conflicts, the world wars are epic conflicts. Civil wars may not be epic conflicts. And I just had a thought just now that I was wondering if you guys would consider actually the Avengers an epic fantasy, like Marvel type thing, because it's sort of space opera sometimes, but half that stuff is magic. So it's definitely like, is this epic fantasy? I would say probably yes, but we'll throw that out there for fodder for conversation later. But I don't think that it needs to be small or it needs to be big anymore. Like I think I like short stories that are epic fantasy, and you obviously know that there's more out there. But yeah, something to think about.
Okay, so I'm going to be thinking about that Avengers question, but before like we get to a point where we can kind of dig into that, it actually brought up a good point with short stories. So there's a couple of venues out there that have epic fantasy shorts as part of their publication. So how do you right podcast? So yeah, exactly. So how do you feel? What's the difference between epic fantasy on a short story level versus on a trilogy or like multi-volume level? So I'm gonna start with you, Sheree, because you brought it up first. So.
I also like to write epic fantasy short stories, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about this particular size boundary, but I think it needs to feel like there is a lot more. And so that means either the very real threat of some sort of larger than life problem, or just the traces of it on the outside, like while using the things that are familiar to us for epic fantasy, whether it is like a medieval setting, or if it is just like some really cool magic system, like those shorthand traces that sort of signify to the reader, this is part of an epic fantasy world. This may be one small piece, but it's a larger piece of a whole. Like I have this really short flash fiction called The Cook, and it's just about like a little soldier who like falls in love with a cook at an inn. But there are these familiar aspects that you will notice if you are familiar with epic fantasy tropes. Like there's the innkeeper, there's the soldier, the food. And I would argue that tiny, tiny story is epic fantasy. So I don't know.
No, I think the tropes, playing on the tropes, like you gotta mess with the reader's expectations, are kind of like dig into them. I think you did that really well, Christopher, with the Leviathan story in Uncanny. Like that that felt epic to me. So I would be interested what are your thoughts on like that topic.
Okay. I was actually thinking of another short story of mine, which is If Salt Lose Its Savor, which um, is actually set in the secondary world that I am writing two larger projects in. And the scale of that story and the stakes for the individual character are not really huge, but it's also kind of set against a much bigger backdrop. It takes place where there is kind of a global war happening, and people are the idea behind the story actually came from an article I read about somebody working at a weapons factory, and it got me thinking about what would it be like if, you know, every day your job was to go in and make part of a drone or a missile, but you didn't really realize that. All you knew was that you went and you cast this little piece of metal, or you were really good with ceramics, and you kind of discovered that what you were doing was really horrible and ended up in thousands of people's death. So the main character in that story finds out that what she does, and basically she harvests a kind of artisan salt that you can use for spells, uh, is responsible for the deaths of entire cities. And it really takes a toll on her. So she decides to stop production of the salt. And to me, like, it's a very small personal story, but it kind of feels like it's sort of on a more epic scale. And I guess I would say that's how, in short stories, epic is more. It's a very tiny little snippet of the world at large, but it gives you a glimpse into something that is much bigger than what you see on the page.
And I think you and Sheree both kind of touched on that when talking about the cook versus talking about like someone in the weapons plant. So I think that I'm holding on to that actually. Ebony, I know you've written some shorts with fantasy elements to them. So what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. And that is just that a short is obviously giving you only this small, narrow lens of a potentially giant world, and that the novel just allows you to explore that in a deeper way and kind of dig into that world building, allow us to see what makes that world so unique, right? Touch on more elements, whereas the short story has to do a little bit more work of playing on what you already know, because we don't have time, especially in a flash piece. You don't have time to try and set up the world as much. So you do have to kind of play a little bit with what people know and what they don't know. And I think it also adds to the point Christopher was making, that all of this genre stuff is a little bit arbitrary, because I do think most fantasy work has to do that. If you have a long period, if you're writing a novel, regardless of the kind of fantasy you're writing, you're probably getting to dig into the way that you've broken the world a little bit, whether that's a first world or a secondary world. Whereas in a short story, you just have to narrow in and say, here's what you need to know to understand this moment. And that's all you get. You might know that there's more happening in the backdrop, but you're not going to get to see all of that here.
No, absolutely. I think that's the common theme. Chelsea, I will let you bring this question home. What are you thinking on it?
Okay, well, I'm glad I went last because if I went first, I was gonna be very scared because I've never actually written an epic fantasy short story, and so I just kind of made a guess about what it would be about. And what I found is that I was half right, and that this is incredible. I'm super excited. I want to try this. I was thinking about how it's really easy to just go on forever. And that's part of the beauty of the doorstopper epic fantasy is you have all the room to do whatever you want. But in a short story, you're constrained by the form. And that means that you have to get elegant. And this is what I heard from everyone, is that what you're doing is you are writing a small story, but you are doing it in a way that expands inside the reader's mind and becomes bigger than what's on the page. Like, I heard the description of the salt loses its savor, and I was just like, wow, that is incredible. Holy smokes. So I was very happy about that, about learning about that. And so I'm glad you guys all helped me.
Well, and I'm the same way with the Salt story. I mean, I read it already, but knowing that there's more work in that world, I was like, oh wait, is this the one that's taking forever, Christopher? Or
It's one of two that are taking forever, and actually they're both in the same world, but at different periods, and they are kicking my ass, both of them.
now you have Chelsea Polk who wants more, so just, just take that energy and run with it. All right, so I think we laid down a good foundation. So now we can talk about some fun stuff. So what fantasy is exciting you right now? Now I kind of opened up this question too because I like to leave space for people that may not be published yet, but that we all are reading and we know that they're good. So I'll start off with Ebony.
So I think I get to be the first person to say everybody on this panel, what you're writing, fantastic. I can't wait to read more. I'm always excited. Brent, I include you in that. If you haven't had an opportunity to read any of Brent's work, it's like 95% secondary world. It's amazing. I'm super excited for somebody to become his agent so I can actually buy the books and not just read them in my email. I cannot wait. Beyond him, I'm really excited about, this is going to sound like I'm just hanging out with all my friends, honestly, because I'm really excited with LD Lewis's work. Her novella is back here somewhere, A Ruin of Shadows. That world I really love. The others are back there too, actually, all my favorites. Kaya Shanti Wilson is a favorite of mine. Shalion is a classic, but it's one of my favorite. I feel like that to me is the quintessential epic fantasy. And who else was I gonna say that's up and coming? Jen Brown is also amazing, who has written for Faya before. So just amazing work. So there's so many great people who are like, I just can't wait until people pick them up so I can buy all the books. I don't have enough room. My partner's going to murder me if I bring more books in the house, but it's going to happen anyway. So
Yes, I love like all those names too. Chelsea, who out there right now is like catching your attention that's really like sparking your interest?
I need a pocket dimension that exists outside of time, but the only thing I can bring with me inside the pocket dimension is books. and yeah, that's what so I'm going to admit my guilt. I want to talk about a couple years ago. I met Jordan Ifioko, who wrote Raybearer, just as she was going through the process of like, I wrote a book and it's being published, and what do I do? And I told her, second book's going to try and murder you. Fight back. And I got a chance to read it. I loved it. I loved it so much. I was like, yes, this is so great. I am waiting. Like, I have a little to-do list of books that I need to read before I can get to the book that I really, really want to read. So once I'm done my duty and obligation books, I'm going to read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. And I will tell you right now that I will wait patiently for whatever Rebecca wants to do next. I will not rush her. I will not tell her what to do. I will just wait and be grateful. And I want to go way back. I am still mad that we are not getting the rest of the story that started with Black Wolves by Kate Elliott, because she was doing something there that I just loved. Like, she basically wrote this book and I was like, this is what I want epic fantasy to be. Like, years ago, I want the rest of the story. Please give it to me.
Yeah, emphatically agree about Black Wolves. That book carried me. I mean, I listen to audio, but that book carried me from California to New Mexico. Like, and I did not stop listening to it. Like, amazing book. And Ray Bear, the lady was like hands down my single favorite antagonist last year. Like, she's everything Cersei should have been. And I just those are good Rex. Okay, before I gush out, Christopher, you mentioned two like non-European stories you were thinking about.
Yeah, the first is someone has already been mentioned, which is Kaya Shanti Wilson. The world that he set in A Taste of Honey and Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps and Super Base is obviously a very well planned out, well thought out world. And like, I, I'm a big fan of his. And I'm anxiously waiting for his next work to come out. I haven't really had a lot of chance to read any longer than short story length fantasy or science fiction of the last year, mostly because I've been reading a lot of things of research for my own stuff. So I've been reading a lot of history, a lot of chemistry, a lot of completely not very interesting things that I need to ground stuff because there's stuff I don't know and I need to at least be able to fake it. Um, but I'm always happy to see work by Domenica Fetoplas. I'm really excited to see the development of LP Kindred. There's probably 30 or 40 other people I could name. Benjamin Shradenku's Fantasy Worlds are another non-European one that seemed totally fresh and interesting to me. And I should have made a list, but there are so many new interesting writers right now that I would just love to get my hands on something longer from them.
All right. Well, last but not least, our editor, Sheree. Who's exciting you right now with fantasy?
So, as far as epic fantasy goes, I definitely second a lot of the names already mentioned. Like, we actually poached Jen Brown's story from Faya, the hair dragon story, and I want a big one. Like, I want to I want the 1,000 pages. Definitely look forward to. I know everybody's talking about Shelley Parker Chan's She Who Became the Sun, and it's just so that, and then The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. They are both just so queer. Like, She Who Became the Sun, it handled gender in a way that I've never seen, and that made me feel seen. Like, I've never felt the way I did when I was reading that book. And it hits my particular buttons of sort of tragic epic fantasy. And then on The Jasmine Throne, it's just so pretty. But so something I do like, but haven't found as much in the books that I'm reading. Like I just mentioned, I like the tragedy, but I also like some romantic fantasy. And there's a really great central relationship in The Jasmine Throne that never makes me feel like we're losing the wider scope of the conflict for the small scope of the relationship. It balances both really, really well. And so if you guys haven't already pre-ordered those, go do it.
I'm pretty sure I have. My bookstore probably has like a pre-order list a mile long for me. But well, so I'm not gonna let this question pass by without me mentioning some of the things that I love from you guys. Like Witchmark. I love it so much. I'll be honest, and now that you made the argument for it being epic fantasy, I'm like, maybe that's what clicked for me. Because usually Regency stuff, I'm just like, maybe. But then I was like, okay, first it's by a person of color, and then it felt epic, and I think that's what did it. I was just like, hell yes, give me more. Ebony, Stone and Steel obviously was just it was like Game of Thrones packed into a novella, and it was just, it was so good, and I loved it. I love Aaliyah, Aaliyah stand forever. I finished Unbroken, I think right at the beginning of this year, and I mean, Sheree got DMs from me. I was like, we're talking about this, we got to talk about these characters. It's just, so pick up those books. And Christopher, I've pretty much read all your short stories at this point. In fact, I'll just say the story real quick. I remember when his story came through the Spire Slush, and I immediately was DMing the editors at the time. I was like, pick this story out, read it. I want it in the magazine. I will fight about it. And here I am with all these great writers, and I'm lucky to be here. And just thank y'all guys for putting such great work out into the world. So that was my spiel before I moved on to the next question. So because I'm sitting here hyping you guys up as such great writers, which you are, This next question, we're gonna like let the audience hear a little bit about your writing and what are some of your personal writing tenets when you decide to dive into an epic fantasy story? Like, what brings you joy when you're in this process of writing, and what things do you try to avoid? So I saw Sheree had a big smile. I'm gonna start off with you on this one.
So I was laughing because my technique is kind of counterintuitive to everything we've sort of talked about as far as scope and everything. So like maybe I come up with some sort of vague gee whiz magic thing, but usually I start with the character. Like, oh, you know what would be cool? I picture this like really hot, brooding, gay warrior chick. I mean, like if you read my stories, you know that's usually where they start. So you have that character, and then I'm like, okay, well, obviously she's deeply troubled, or maybe they're deeply troubled with some sort of cool problem or relationship. And so it's like, boom, tragic love. And then usually the tragic love is the problem. So, and then we sort of start building out potential magical problems from there, like conflicts to situate their smaller personal issues. So if they're enemies, why? Is there a power imbalance? Yes. Is there like a social strata? Is there a magical strata? Like, are they competing over magical artifacts? Like, the world and the conflict that is epic spans out from there. Usually they come first.
I'm just learning. I'm absorbing. All right. So, Chelsea, I'm gonna let you go next because I'm really interested to hear what you have to say on this after having just finished Midnight Bargain. So,
Okay, so I do a thing where I just like I'm developing a book. I let myself run around like a maniac. I just go wherever whim takes me for months. It's like world building, character descriptions, and conflict, but I stay very far away from the idea of nailing down a plot. I will come up with scenes that I think would be cool in the book if I actually get to a moment where they're called for, and they help me to build my excitement of what's going on. But I spend a lot of time kind of thinking about the world that I want to write. Because one of the things that I want to do is, I want to be part of the conversation between all of these various epic fantasy texts. Like I want to talk to them with my book. But one of the things that I like the most is taking like really common assumptions about what epic fantasy is supposed to be about, and not necessarily like openly defying them, but just kind of going off in a different direction because I had an idea and this will be interesting. I'm generally like, I will think about geography and I will think about like the physical facts of the world to a certain extent. But what I'm really interested in are big groups of people. So like extended families, social clubs, neighborhoods, city populations, nationalities, ethnicities, and like just big groups of people. I love them. It's like, let me get a bunch of them and like figure out what they believe and what they do and what they aspire to. And I will find problems. I will find problems that make me mad and I will write about them.
yeah, I can tell with the problems that make you mad because this book, it was
so angry.
It was anger, but it was agreement, and I was like, well, I'm with the anger. Like, yes, these people, but it was so beautifully done. So Christopher, I know you kind of talked about like how you feel like the genre lines are kind of like arbitrary and whatnot. So does that affect how you approach writing epic fantasy?
Well, I mean, for me, I also start with a character first almost all of the time. So how the world is, how it reacts, and how it responds, honestly, is generally a reflection of that character. I mean, in the two longer things I'm writing are in a world that is shared, so there's a little bit more to that, but that's just I've already made the world, so it's kind of like just setting another story in Los Angeles. I already know how Los Angeles works. Um, but like those characters work with that world, whereas let's say the carpenter in Cast I Draw Out the Leviathan, he is a very rational world person, so he's on a whaling ship. So once I get a good idea of who the character is, what they want, uh, what they don't want, what's in the way of what they want, then I have an idea of, well, what kind of world reflects that? Is it a world that is full of magic? Is it a world that has modern technology? Is it our world? Femme and Sundance is pretty much set in our world, well, with magic. And once I have that down pat, just everything else is kind of filling in the blanks, all of the stuff that I don't know. But if I don't have the character first, I can't build the world.
Okay. Is it the same for you, Ebony? Do you have to have that character first?
Yeah, I really can't go anywhere unless I know who is working in whatever we're doing. And often for me, it starts out as a relationship. I don't know if you can tell that from my work, but often we're dealing with two people who are either going to ride off into the sunset happily or, crash and burn. Sometimes both are going to happen. But yeah, I always start with a character who's really interesting and then probably the person who is going to be driving them nuts for the next several pages, and then start to build in the broader world and what's happening around them that forces them to drive each other nuts.
Oh, Sheree, you want to throw something else on there?
Yeah, I do, because I was thinking about, like, we all seem to be fairly like people-centric writers, but I did want to add that, like, when melding the two, or if the world or the like weird fantasy element comes first, no matter what you're doing, you still, like, you have to meld the two. Like, they become sort of symbiotic after a bit. Like, your character should reflect the world, like their problems should reflect the whatever fantasy world they live in. So if you have a world where, people have magic electro fingers and this person needs to be safe from them, and so he like hangs out in like a lead jacket, I don't know, whatever, where I'm going with this, right? So like their problems, even if their social problems, are related to the world that they're in, and that shapes their character. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm related to kind of what you said too. I think that's something all of you do well, is that very early on in whatever it is that you're writing, I clearly understand what the world is throwing at this character and what they are trying to fight against. Like in Unbroken, I very quickly understood, oh damn, Terrain, poor thing, she's dealing with this. Like it's right off top. All right. When I read Salt Loses Its Flavor, I was just like, oh, these poor people. Like they're in the situation where it's all of you do that. Like, or even in Midnight Bargain, first chapter. By the way, in the audience, if you want to know how to establish stakes, first chapter of this book. Yeah, it's just you all do that very well, and I guess that kind of leads right into my next question. All of your works, to varying degrees that I've read, you have these relationships that are hard fought for. They are not easy. Their happiness is not easily given to them at any point. Like they have to fight for it. And for me, at least, that feels true to me, especially as like a queer person. So I guess I just was wondering, like, do you think that that's something queer authors can uniquely bring to relationships and epic fantasies? Like, in what way does being queer like affect that? I guess that's what I'm getting at. So I'm gonna start with Chelsea on this one because
I'm grinning.
Yes, you're grinning, and I also want to hear your thoughts because I'm just like, I'm learning from all of you right now, so I'm just absorbing the knowledge.
Okay, the first thing I want to say is the idea that relationships are not complicated sounds so fake to me. I don't even but I think that it's completely natural for queer authors to write all of their character relationships and in ways that maybe like add dimension or nuance or complication, because that's our experience. We inevitably had to like live in a world where our experiences didn't follow the mainstream status quo. But the thing that springs from that, because it's not like, oh, poor us, we don't get to be normal, is that we experience community and interpersonal relationships differently. Because instead of just following the system and doing what it tells us, we get to be the authors of how we relate to each other. We get to decide. We're constantly engaging with how to do community, how to do relationships, because we don't have to fit ourselves into these norms. We get to decide what works for us and collaborate on what works for us together. And this is why queer people run in packs. And you know, I really enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that I think about how I relate to other people in a very different way, because I can't just kind of comfortably assume that this is just the way it is, because I know it's not.
Yeah. Oh, I love that answer. See, I knew it. I was like, knock this out the park. I was like, they're gonna knock it, and you knocked it right out the park. So it's like, all right. So Christopher, you have some interesting relationships. I've read like Femme and Sundance, for instance. Like that was such an interesting relationship. So like, how do you approach it, and like, why do you think queer authors uniquely can do this?
I'll admit that a motivation for me is actually spite. Because one of the things I hate seeing in fiction, there's a trope of like this innocent, usually white, porcelain, delicate boy who weeps a lot and is fragile and is not sexually experienced, and he falls in love with like some butch guy who has never thought about a man before, and like it's just so tedious. And my experience certainly wasn't like that. Like um basically for me, my life was being afraid that everybody would find out I was gay. People found out I was gay, it was all right. Then I was able to have sex, and sex was great, and I had a lot of it. And so sometimes when I create characters to reflect that. But mostly like there may be people who have the same experience of the porcelain white uh innocent virgin. I'm not discounting that, but it wasn't me. And if something doesn't exist, I think sometimes you've got to create it. And so I'm just kind of doing my part by helping create it, by making different queer people who present a little differently than the tropes I'm used to seeing, and present more like the people I grew up with and, well, the person I was. So when I write a relationship, one, I try to have it have that kind of spark of realness, which is messy. Like real relationships are messy, and even if they're happy ones, they're not happy straightforwardly. There's always conflict and drama, and people misunderstanding you, and people getting upset over something that shouldn't upset them. And I feel like that should be reflected on the page too. And I am at heart kind of a dopey romantic, so I do want to see them end up happy together. But I also don't want it to feel to me like those porcelain doll relationships do, which to me just feels fake, and it doesn't feel like an experience that I've ever had. So, yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
No, that's perfect. And in fact, it makes me think about all of your work at the same time. Like the porcelain doll thing, I despise it. It is okay, not despise. I shouldn't say that's a strong word, but it is something that I don't think has ever felt authentic. And there's definitely a certain type of writer who writes it, right? Like I think you can do yearning and longing in an interesting way. Like I think of like Tristan and Dr. Miles and Witchmark, right? Like Josie, they had them. There was a little longing there, and there was some innocence, but it didn't feel uncomplicated. Like it still was complex. There was still like some tightness and some interesting things happening in that relationship. So that's why I had to start off with y'all, because like I was like, oh yeah, they have these really interesting relationships that I just want to dig into. And I had left Sheree and Ebony at the end because I think they have like a similar axis going on with their relationships too. So I'm gonna start with you, Ebony.
Okay, I see Sheree making me go first. Yeah, I think I don't even know if it's about queer folks being uniquely positioned so much as we are just in the position to express our own experience, which has not been at the forefront up until now. And also that we have this opportunity to play with relationships, even beyond romantic relationships. Like I think Stone and Steel is both about the romance between some of the people who are in the book and the non-romantic relationships between the found family that Aaliyah has built for herself. There is a lot of this that is about, oh, are you going to ride with me or are you not? And how do we figure out and make that relationship work? And how do we continue to drive each other crazy year after year after year and still stand beside each other when it looks like we're going to have to, die for the thing we believe in? All of that is important. And all of that, I think, feels like it is very much part of queer identity, right? Of having to build your own found family, pick up where someone else has chosen not to leave off, or maybe they're including your blood relatives, but you also get to say, I'm going to build upon that and pick other folks to be included in my closeness. And I think that's maybe the part that queer folks are uniquely positioned to. And I think also it ties a little bit, at least for me, into that Blackness as well, that experience of, everybody wanting the trauma story, everybody wanting to hear about how somebody died and nobody loves me anymore and all of this stuff. And isn't it great to just be able to give us a little bit of joy, just a little bit of care, and just have a good time instead of always crying, always suffering? That doesn't mean that the suffering isn't important. It definitely helps people to move forward and helps us to get where we're going. But hopefully there's some positivity that comes out at the other side of that.
No, absolutely. I like that, Joy. I'm gonna hold on to that. 'Cause I'm gonna circle back on that later. Dre, I know you probably can't spoil too much because the book's covered out. So I'm not gonna expect a whole lot, but
So I've been thinking about this a lot because if you guys are very online, and if you're keyed into the sapphic community or sometimes specifically lesbian fiction community, you might have heard some of the conversations back and forth about how much sexuality female characters or female adjacent characters, depending on the story and the author, like how much desire they're allowed to show. Like, is it only yearning? Is it like pinned up against the wall? Is it negatively sexualizing? Is it predatory? That kind of thing. It's all been talked about lately as we sort of struggle with this new world that we're in. Like a few years ago, like I would have killed to see this many queer women in fiction. Like, could not imagine the fact that we're about to have probably like the gayest year in Orbit's publishing alone. Orbit alone, let alone all of the rest of the big five, let alone all of the rest of the small presses, right? And so part of me is just like, everybody shut up. We're going to take all of it. All of it.
so I saw in the chat that Chelsea wants to do some dunking, so I'm going to let them dunk away. Let's dunk.
Okay, I will start the nonsense. Virginity is a scam. It is heteronormative nonsense. It's sexist as hell, and we should abolish it.
Okay, well then let me go with that then. So one of the big things that people are talking about is not letting women be overtly sexually attracted to each other, like straight up horny. Let's just put it out there. And I agree with that. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is, I think I saw somebody say that one of the problems with this is that we are so used to having to get our gayness subtextually that there's some sort of like we're used to liking that and being sort of satisfied with that. And so we still like, I personally want all of it. I still want all of it. But there is, I do have this soft spot. And maybe this is where the uniquely situated to write it. I have a soft spot for writing the long, extenuated, like like long gratification, not short-term gratification.
Slow
Like
burn.
you gotta
That's
wait
slow
for
The
it.
slow
Yeah,
burn.
yeah.
Oh, I love a slow
That's
burn.
the one. And because I mean, like,
I keep referencing back to it, but
we used to have to wait a slow burn for like ever, and we just like make it up at the end. Like I think right now I think of Xena, the TV show, that was 6 seasons, and then we got a sort of water exchange kiss, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take the win. But I think that is something that a lot of us, especially like millennial and older maybe, or if you had to stay in a closeted home where you weren't allowed to express affection, or more importantly, like your assumptions of other people's queerness are different. Like right now, I run in circles that I assume the people I meet are queer before I assume that they're straight. But when I was younger, that wasn't the case. So it was a lot of like, oh, did she look at me this way? Or did she touch my hand on purpose? What is the meaning of this flower she has drawn in the corner of my notebook page? Is that like for me? Or no. Okay, it's not. It's not for me.
God, I'm laughing, but it's awful.
Right.
Yeah, because that's like
yeah.
all the Yuri is. Schoolgirl. Oh, what did you want to hand me that, senpai? Oh my gosh. Oh, is that your notebook? You're gonna let me write in it? Oh my gosh.
Well, Chelsea, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like when I was a teenager in the 80s, I knew I wasn't straight. Like I knew. I knew it was just like basically that I had this thing where I was like, I just like, how dare all of these people be so attractive kind of thing going on. And I had these intense friendships with other girls where we were like very emotionally close. We were like actually inseparable. We got to the point where we could finish each other's sentences. And like, I didn't really feel right when I wasn't with her. And I didn't know that I was like madly in love with my girl. And that I was just like, we're just really good friends. It's like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And I'm kind of glad that now it's like this thing where we can kind of laugh about it. It's like, I just gals being pals, am I right? Yeah. That it's becoming more open, but oh my goodness, it's going to be so great when we can just be who we are, no matter where we are.
Yeah, no. I think of Christopher's work too, and when I think about this, I mean, I say this with no exaggeration, Christopher, so don't think I'm just like gassing you up, but like, I did not think I had permission to write sex like that until I read some of your work, and I was like, oh, we can do that. Okay, well, I'm gonna do that now, and I feel like you very much are defiant against this idea of like what our relationships on the page could look like. So I just wanted to shout you out real quick.
There is a thing that I have been doing lately, and more militantly. Fem and Sundance is probably a good example of it, where I just put the sex right up on the page. And to be honest, my wife Alice, who is my first reader always, when she read it, she wanted there to be more sex, and I'm like, I'm never going to sell this. And actually, I sold it on the first submission, so I should probably listen to her more. Um, but in Leviathan, also the sex scene is very early, and both of those were intentional because I do like a lingering will they, won't they slow burn sometimes. But sometimes I feel like as queer people, we're always expected to have all of these restricted and refined and uh, like heteronormative roles that don't sometimes reflect reality. And there have been cases where sometimes I have hit it long before I knew there were any feelings. Where I've had sex with somebody on first meeting, and then like later, I'm like, wow, they're a great person. And so every now and then, I kind of want to reflect that too, because I feel like that's a real lived experience, and I don't feel like it's touched on enough.
No, absolutely. Oh, I think Chelsea, you gonna say something?
I was gonna say, I think part of the reason why like the romances that I've written so far in my books are really slow burny, is that it's like it's a really easy way to get conflict. Like it's really easy. So if I have a couple of people who like they want to have sex with each other, but there are reasons why sex with each other. That's simple. That's like, here you go. Here's your kit. And that I have a character in my head, and she is an opera singer. She is like an incorrigible flirt, and that she basically is like flirting with everyone that she meets, and she has sex with people because it's fun and interesting. And it's not, and it's about like how she likes to do this, and that it is not wrong and it is not shameful. And now I'm gonna do that.
Yes. See, I'm so glad we just got. I feel like this question just got us rolling, so I like it. All right, so this question will probably maybe stir up some more. Oh, one more. Oh, see, Sheree, you go right ahead. Got
Okay,
it.
just one more thing, sort of with that. So something that I'm noticing that we're talking about is just like more just general sexual freedom that does sort of like in writing and specifically, but of social behavior. And I think because queer folks are already on this line of tabooness, or can be, some of them are not, which, you know, whatever, that we're proximal to other types of relationship. And so I think that another thing is just, you know, that aspect of openness. So it's usually, but not always, but usually queer writers who are writing like the polyamorous love triangle as like that kind of solution, as opposed to like only you must pick one or the other one must die or whatever. Like there are just more options, more kinds of relationships. And that's all I wanted to add.
Such good thoughts. I'm like gonna walk away from this feeling so good. Okay, so next question. I guess we'll probably stir up some more opinions and thoughts here. So fantasy, science fiction, whatever in general, they've had to deal with a lot of reckonings with its past in the past decade or so. Um, so what do you all think that epic fantasy still needs to reckon with when it comes to its legacy, and where can it grow for better? I'm gonna start with Christopher on this one.
Well, the first place, epic fantasy has a huge misogyny problem. Um, and the thing I've been talking about a lot lately, in fact, I tweeted it earlier today, is that your made up ass world does not have to reflect real life systems of oppression. And I think it's fine to explore that. Like, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say I don't explore that. I explore racism and homophobia and all sorts of other stuff in my own writing. But I feel like there is a kind of unexamined, like, well, this is the way things were. And in the first place, it wasn't always the way things were. It's the way things we think they were, but that isn't always how it really was. In the second place, you just made up this world. It doesn't have to be that way. And I mean, along with misogyny is obviously the racism problems. Uh, you have all these things where there's dragons, but not even a black person. And I'm like, there were black people in medieval Europe. Well, why can't they be in your fantasy book? Uh, Beyond that, I think that there is a kind of tendency towards formality and a kind of looking backwards to the past in a kind of rosy tinted view that really needs to be examined more. Because even though everybody's murdering people and lying and scheming and poisoning and jockeying for thrones, there still is a sort of underlying feel that, well, if we only had the right king, this system would work. And that's no, the monarchy didn't work for a reason. There's a reason that like all the monarchs that are now, except for a few, are pretty much figureheads. It's because it sucks as a system. Uh, and I think that really needs to be examined a lot more, and people need to have a lot more thought about what the worlds they're writing actually imply.
Ooh, good stuff. All right, Ebony, I want to move to you on this question. What do you think we need to reckon with in fantasy?
I mean, I think we could get into the little things, but the biggest thing is just the gatekeeping, right? That like, if I want to say what I'm writing is epic fantasy, how are you going to tell me it's not? who are you to tell me that what I wrote was not epic fantasy? And to the beginning of our conversation, right? I get to decide and define if that's what I said it was, that's what I said it is. And enough of this, oh well, it doesn't seem real enough. What are these Black people doing here? Nobody was gay in olden times, that never happened. It's not possible. Like all of this stuff, it's fantasy. We're making it up as we go along. If we're making it up, it doesn't matter. And I get to define what is true from my world in the same way you can define, if you want to say that's true in your world, you can. It makes me look at you a little bit differently because that's what you decided you were going to do. But that is what it is. You just told on yourself.
Hey man, they always do. All right, Sheree, I'm gonna let you go on this one.
I mean, if anybody's seen my stories or has read The Unbroken, or even like seen me at different panels, you guys know my pet topic is like how we deal with war and conquest and fantasy. Like, kind of along with the tinting of history, Rosalie, we tend to rose tint war as well. It's this noble pursuit. It's where people earn honor and glory. Blah 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 blah. And I mean, it's not limited to epic fantasy, obviously. It's also a very current media issue. But like, and I say this as someone who loved that aspect of epic fantasy. And so part of the reason I'm so fascinated with is because it hooked me so hard as a kid. It hooks me even now. And so part of the reason I continue to write these war stories is because I want to continue digging at why it's so fascinating to us. And I actually have an essay coming out at Fantasy Magazine about this topic. So stay tuned for April. But I want people to examine, and this is authors, but also readers, like examine your expectations as you go into this story. Not just about like, you know, are we always fighting the brown people or the mysterious monster, because there are no actual brown people in the book. Not just that, but also that. But that's like 101. We can move on, I think. And so also to start thinking about the consequences of it. A lot of the books, not all of them, but a lot of them do stop at the victory, the conquest over whatever. And one of the things that I want to see more, and because I think fantasy is really good at examining social things, just like science fiction, is how we start handling the aftermath. Because right now, yes, the imperial powers are still in full force, but we have also a lot of post-colonial nations, and so much of our conflict is because of the imperial powers being like, okay, had your revolution, we're done with you, but what are they actually still doing? How have they handicapped these other like sovereign nations with their conflict, or with whatever, like after taxes? Like, what does it actually mean if your heroic king is taking over an actual other nation? What does that do to them when the king decides that he's done? And that's not even counting like what it means if your monarch falls. But
So if you liked all of that you just heard, pick up The Unbroken, because those topics are very much interlaced into that book. So if you liked it, pick up Unbroken. Chelsea, I am going to let you bring us home on this question.
Hey, so I have some thoughts, and a lot of the thoughts coincided with the thoughts that have already been shared. Therefore, they were good thoughts. And what I have left is salt and pessimism, and I kind of feel bad about that. One of the things that's like, I think the epic fantasy reckoning is coming. I really do. I think that because when people start talking about like what are some good epic fantasy recommendations, I hear certain author names, a very limited handful of certain author names of books that I do admittedly enjoy over and over again, and certain series names over and over again as the pinnacle of the genre, and in many cases the only people who exist in the field. And holy crap, I am tired. Please read an additional book. I am asking nicely, please. Something else. But I have kind of a feeling about that, and it's not a nice feeling. I think that a lot of people are really, really noisy. Stop it. A lot of people are really, really noisy about certain authors writing epic fantasy because their views are comforted by the way those people write epic fantasy, and that they really want that comfort. A lot of readers of epic fantasy have said to me that they don't care about that political stuff, and that's why they read epic fantasy. And they don't like it when I point out to them that epic fantasy is political as hell. They just don't see it because it makes them comfortable. And I think that as we expand and we write more epic fantasy and we widen the field, we're going to see pushback, that we are going to have a fight over this. The battle is going to be a thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, hell, I'm not gonna put any of y'all in the ring, but I'll just name them. If I never have to hear fucking Malazan ever again, I will. Yeah, there's not enough time in the universe to never hear about that series of books again. Or if I have to hear about the pinnacle of toxic white boy King Killer Chronicles ever again, it would be cool. Like. I'm just gonna name it because I know y'all being polite and nice, but no, hell no. I am so tired of hearing about these certain stories. And Chelsea is absolutely right. It is so political because it is whiteness. It is pure distilled whiteness, and that's why they love it. And yeah. So I knew that was gonna be a good question. I knew I was gonna get some I knew I was gonna get some blood flowing. We got about 15 more minutes, so we can probably do this last question here. Okay, so we got all serious and whatnot and talk about some more dramatic stuff, but let's talk about some fun stuff. So we're gonna talk about your writing. What is an epic fantasy project that you're looking forward to writing? It doesn't have to be something you're actually writing now. It could be though. Or yeah, just some. I just want to give y'all some space to like geek out about stuff you're writing or that you want to write in the future. So I'm gonna start out with Eboni on this one.
Oh, okay. Though I have one project I continue to not finish, which is, I think it's a novelette. It probably should be a novella, but I'm refusing to do that. That is centered around this song by B. Steadwell called which I think I said on AMA as well, that like literally everything I write pretty much is trying to encapsulate what that song does for me as a human being. And so I have this story that is about a Lamia who is trying to seduce a sultan who has a soldier who's in love with her and trying to keep her from being seduced by the Lamia. I haven't exactly figured out how to finish it yet, so I'm going to at some point, but it's we'll get there.
I mean, it sounds great, and I want to hear it. This is part. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. This question is more for me than for y'all because I just want to get excited about stuff you're doing. So, well, Sheree, you have a book about to drop, so this is probably an unfair question, but I'm gonna kick it to you anyway.
So yeah, the thing about trilogies is they have a long tail. So the project in my head that I'm excited about, other than the other books I have on contract, and probably won't actually get to like really dive into for like 100 years, is I said that I started my epic fantasy life with these big, the books that no longer need to be named, right? Like Wheel of Time and even like what's his face, King Killer, la la la. And there's something about the sort of ensemble epic quest sword business that I really love. And I did spend, a couple decades just reading only them and really wanting to see myself in them. And right now, I still haven't quite gotten just what I want. And so I want to do that. I want to write like really gay, like, the broody hot warrior chick with the sword. Because right now I'm in gunpowder land. So I want to take it back and just do a properly like medieval fantasy sprawl, but with all of the Black people, like maybe some Black elves, even like, there's straight up just everything I ever wanted in like that classic package, except better.
Please, can I have it?
Thank you, Chelsea. Just give it to me now. Like, just, I want it. All right, Chelsea, you're building a catalog, so I don't know if you've already done your dream thing or if you still have bigger things in mind that you're thinking about, but I want to hear it regardless. So,
Okay, I'm working on a new project, and it is definitely epic fantasy, and that's all I can tell you. I can't even give you a hint because I'm in the idea stage, and this stage is very fragile. I need to protect it. Because like I have killed story ideas by talking about them before they were ready to be talked about. So, and I love this one. Like it's making my head fizz. Like it's wonderful. And I really, really, really want to get it out there. So I can't talk about it.
okay.
Ask me again in a year. In a year, ask me again.
Totally fair, because I want the book, so we will not talk about it anymore. All right, Chris, I know you said you're working on a couple of things, but outside of that, like, what are you thinking about you want to write in the future?
Well, I just will talk about one of the things I'm writing about. Of the two things that longer things that I'm working on right now that are kicking my ass, the shorter one, which is also closer to being finished, although it's a long way from being finished, is a novella. And if I had to give a comp for it, I would say it was Dangerous Liaisons meets Paris is Burning. And essentially, it's there's a conflict between two nobles in a kind of early modern court ruled by terrifyingly powerful Black queen. The queen of this country is always the queen, regardless of gender. So there are sometimes male queens and sometimes female queens. She's not really that important to the story, but she's part of the background. And the main bit of the story is about two rival poisoners who work for the courts of each of the rival nobles and kind of their struggles. And one is a non-binary female who specializes in botanics. And I have so much fun just dressing her because she's just absolutely fabulous. And the other one is this really dry humored ascetic type who wears all black, who specializes in chemicals. And it's about their kind of growing respect for each other while they're carrying out these various nefarious plots to lower the other noble in the eyes of the court. So that's the thing I'm most excited about, and it is the thing I'm closest to finishing.
I'm so excited. I want it so bad, Chris. Like what? I just wow. Dang, like y'all are so good. And the thing with I can't even talk, Chris. You got me that messed up. Like, well, the thing with Chris is that like he is so meticulous about his writing, and it just shows. And like, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just feel like you think about everything down to even like the sentence level, like with the words that you choose and how it's structured and the rhythm.
I am absolutely a pain in the ass in the revision stage, and Alice puts up with so much for me because one, I make her listen to me read it, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And like sentence by sentence, we go through it, and I do so much research for stuff that nobody needs to know. Like, I know, for instance, whether or not doorknobs existed in America in 1813, which is something nobody needs to know, and it's something that I didn't use, but I needed to know it immediately for that story. So,
okay, so
yeah,
I need to know now. Did they?
sort of. Usually the most common door fastening was a latch. The modern doorknob didn't really exist, but there were things that were like a doorknob.
Well, I learned something today. I mean, I learned a lot actually because y'all guys are amazing, and God, I've absorbed so much knowledge and just. I mean, I hope everyone in the audience is just grateful like I am, because like I feel like I'm walking away from this like, wow, this is so cool. Yeah, so I'm a fan of everyone here. We have like 10 more minutes, so I guess before I like keep talking, I'm just gonna give everyone a chance to kind of like say who they are again, where they can find your work, where they can find you, etc. You know, so on and so forth. So I will start with
No, sorry.
who's the
That's
pointing to? Is it
what are you working on, Brent? What do we have to look forward to?
wait, no, I'm the moderator.
We
I do
said we
very
wanted to hear
Tell
what you
us.
had to.
We
So does
demand
the
to
audience.
know.
okay. You know what? This happens all the time. Y'all always this happened at the last panel I did. Anyway, okay, fine. So I actually have a novella coming out from Neon Hemlock next year, fall of next year. It's called A Necessary Chaos. It's basically comp wise, I've heard different things. Like people keep telling me to use This Is How You Lose the Time War, but I kind of was thinking more like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, like meets Jade City is like what I was thinking. So it's kind of about these two guys. They are rivals. One's like part of an anarchist group, and the other one's part of like a spy for like a magical CIA sort of. And they've kind of like both been assigned to like keep notes on each other. And somewhere along the way, they fall in love. And as they fall in love, they get the order they got to kill each other. And so they got to figure out like, do I do what I'm supposed to do, or do I pursue this love and see what happens? So that's what I got coming. You can find me at Brent C. Lambert on Twitter. Yeah, I think I'm obviously with Fire. I always have been. I probably always will be. FireCon's coming up, so look out for that. We'll have some great things coming out of there. And yeah, that's it for me since I got put on the spot. I will go to Eboni as my fellow Fire staff member.
Well, so you should always support FIA because that's just the right thing to do. Stone and Steel is available. I think there are still books, but the more important thing is the ebook is still on sale for $2.99 right now. So you should definitely get it from the Neon Hemlock website. Do that. Aside from this, you can check me out on my website. That'll give you all the references to where I am elsewhere. And that's just my name, ebonidunbar.com.
Okay, I saw a question real quick. I guess I should answer it. I don't have a only one bed scenario, but there are new beaches, so I hope that kind of makes up for it.
Ooh, no new beaches.
All right, so next I will let Chris go.
Hi, I'm Christopher Caldwell, Black writer living in Glasgow. You can find my work at FIA. I'm in issue number 2. I'm in 3 different issues of Uncanny Magazine. I have an upcoming story in Baffling Magazine, which Dave Ring, who helped organize this, is one of the 2 editors for. I had a story in Glitter and Ashes, which was an anthology about a queer end of the world, also put up by Neon Hemlock. And there's a story in Strange Horizons and a couple of other places. But you can find me on Twitter at Seraph76. And I usually don't say anything of interest, but that's where I live. Thanks.
Okay, Chelsea, I will let you go next.
Okay, it's time for the hustle. You can find me on Twitter at CL Polk, where I occasionally run my mouth about whatever. I have a free newsletter that I'm really bad at updating, and you can find it on Substack. That is free. I don't have any books coming up yet. Everything has been cleared. I don't have anything in production. So while I'm working on my next book, I have made a Patreon, and you can get everything I read on that Patreon for $1 American a month. You can pay more if you want to, but I only need $1.
That's well, I'm gonna also add again, having just finished this is a great book, Midnight Bargain. Check it out if you're into the slow burn, the yearning, okay, I'm gonna just be honest. There was one part in this book I legitimately laughed out loud, and I had to put the book down, and because I was like belly laughing. It was the part where she was fucking up the house basically, and I just died laughing, and I couldn't do anything. So if that's a good endorsement, I hope so. Like I legit laughed, and then I don't know. I'm sure we're all book readers. We've all done this. I was reading the book and I was like, what do you mean? So yeah. So you pick up this book. It's a great book. Finally, with that, me being extra, Sharon, I'm gonna let you go.
So again, I am Sheree, or CL Clark is my credit name. I guess I could say I'm also a Black writer, American writer in London, mostly in London. And The Unbroken is coming out. This is my girl Terrain. And like, oh God, 3 weeks, like 3 weeks. Oh my God. Like less than, I don't know, whatever. Real soon, really, really soon. I can't actually imagine it. I will have more different speaking engagement type things if you guys want to come to them, or I'll be on podcasts or doing like blog interviews and stuff. And so I just am dropping all of my things in the chat so you can find me and keep tabs on where I will be, as I know where I will be. That includes website, newsletter, and Twitter are the easiest places to find more details.
Okay, so someone asked when is the arm selfie challenge, and I want to know too because I've been doing push-ups, man. I'm trying to win.
So honestly, I was thinking about this too. I was thinking about it, and well, I was wondering if maybe it's finally getting warm enough that people are not scared to just pop out in some tank tops and whatever.
I mean, I'm in California, so I can roll outside whenever and just,
Okay, well, not all of us are that lucky, Brent. Okay.
Some of us are in Glasgow where it's always cold, always.
Sorry, Christopher. As soon as I said it, I was like, oh no.
I'm in Canada.
I'm sorry, you know what? We have wildfire.
We're having a good time, Brent. We're having a good time.
Everything's on fire. Yeah. Okay. Well.
Like, yeah.
But if people are really interested, it'll probably be later on in the spring when it gets a bit warmer. I have a lot of books, so probably one might be given away. Some actually got misdelivered to my dad's house, and his initials are also CL Clark. So it's possible that someone will get a specially signed and annotated edition from one of the other CLs.
That's actually really cool.
That's an incredible giveaway.
Yeah.
That is an amazing stunt. I love it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. All right, well, before I guess we come up on top, I just want to thank everyone again for coming out. I want to thank the authors for being here. You guys are amazing. I had a great time. Like, I was excited about this before, and it lived up to every expectation I had. So, yeah, thank you so much. This has been great. We got like 4 more minutes, so I probably should have stretched it out just a little bit. But I could talk about Midnight Bargain some more. You know what? Actually, I want to talk a little bit about Unbroken since that's coming up soon. Okay, look, there are some women in this book that had me reconsidering. I was like, maybe I just might be bi. I don't know, possibly. Like, yeah. Sheree is such. God, that was such a great book. Yeah, I can't. Like, honestly, you did such a good job with like the intricacies of what it's like to deal with colonialism and what kind of uncoupling from oppression looks like, and how that's not an easy process, and it's not something you can necessarily take a sledgehammer to and expect it to work. And yeah, so honestly, Yeah, it's awakening. That's what it's doing, Ebony. Yeah, it had, it had me definitely going like, I don't know. But yeah, it's such a good book. I'm super just happy to like finally see this for you too. Cause I don't know if everybody knows, but like our first encounter Sheree in Fire issue 4, I think. Was it Fire issue 4? Yeah, so it's just crazy to see this journey. And I just love that like there's so many queer writers of color that I finally like just breaking these barriers. I mean, that's what I think about when I think of all y'all. Y'all just breaking barriers one by one. Like, yeah. So just happy to be in y'all presence and just to get to absorb all this. But yeah, I think we're almost on time now. So yeah, thank you again. Appreciate it. I know it's late for Chris and Sheree, so thank you for coming out, spending time with us.
Thank you
And
guys. Thank you, Brent.
yeah.
Thank you so much. It was excellent.